the GenAI in TeacherEd Summit 2025?
Looks like they are getting together to work out how to use us.
We better watch what they are doing then.
Up is going to be Matthew. Matthew, are you there?
Yeah, hi Victoria.
There you are.
Matt's
Okay,
fine.
brilliant.
Call me Matt, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, hi everybody. Welcome. Yeah, so I'll present my slides.
Yeah.
Let's see what's happening, if this is going to work. Great
Do you want to
stuff.
introduce yourself?
Yep, happy to introduce myself. So yeah,
Okay.
so Matt, senior lecturer from Brookes University in initial teacher education, primary, with a specialism in computing. So I do computing as well. So that's me. And I've been doing teacher education since 2022. I'm Miles's external examiner, which you mentioned me earlier. So thank you, Miles. So that's good. So
no, thank you, Matt. Thank you.
That's all right. It's all good. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you today about is kind of what we've been experimenting with at Brookes University, based on the work from Georgia. Some of her fantastic work. I've put some of that into this as well. Yeah, just kind of what we've been experimenting with. So we were really interested in how we could use AI tools to support ITAPs, and in particular, modifying existing planning ITAP. Sort of maintain that pedagogical integrity. So thinking about the PCK model, and really kind of working with trainee teachers who are quite often given planning from their schools, and that planning is probably from White Rose or somewhere like that. And then they're having to modify that existing planning and contextualize it and those sorts of things, and then using AI as a way to kind of help them to do that. So this was kind of based off the back of work by the fantastic Jane Waite. Lots of people, I'm sure, know Jane Waite in the call. And her work around these three sort of areas, this Venn diagram, or the three pancakes, as she sometimes calls them, of AI. And we're particularly interested in, the overlap of these different elements. So AI for teacher productivity, which is kind of where this fits into, but also teaching about AI and using AI to teach other subjects, which I guess, so the overlap that I'm kind of interested in is the overlap between AI for teacher productivity and using AI to teach other subjects, and in particular for the planning elements of that. But we're still very much developing all of these things, and we're not quite sure how some of these will develop, but it is happening. So I wanted to position it within that model from Jane's work, which I think is really important for us to keep sight of. I think, yeah, going back to what Miles was saying earlier in his keynote, I'm very much of the same sort of vein in terms of let's not forget our core understanding of how children learn, and obviously going back to William's model, and obviously the model here from Sherrington, around what we attend to is what we learn, putting into our working memory, into our long-term memory, and recalling, and that recall is so important, and building schemas in that way. So yes, AI is going to reshape the way we learn and teach, make sense of the world around us from UNESCO here, but it also has implications for us as teachers around not outsourcing our thinking. We're not outsourcing our thinking, and it can't do the thinking for you. And I think that's very important, and something to teach the trainees, and been doing quite a lot of work on that. And this over-reliance will obviously limit the human-centeredness, and we mustn't lose sight of that human-centeredness. And I got a framework where I'm thinking about how we work with AI to keep that human-centeredness. And obviously then going back to what also was mentioned around ethics, the accuracy and the bias and all those elements of it, and the safeguarding. So yes, definitely, let's not lose sight of why we're here and the good stuff that we already know about how we teach children. Yeah, I think that's important as well. This quote at the bottom, like AI can't support reducing cognitive load. Sorry, can support reducing cognitive load. It's very good at that in lots of ways, but it obviously can't replace the human thinking and the mean making there in particular. So that was quite interesting. So we were looking at this from an ITAP perspective, as I said before. So to bring us back to what we're looking at, so this idea that we've got this ITAP, intensive training and practice, and it's around modifying planning, and it comes from a planning ITAP that they did in year one. So in the first year of the BA program, they did this ITAP around planning, So we've learned how to use the planning pro forma, what makes a good lesson plan. We've done lots of work around IVU lesson planning. We've looked at it's a cognitive process, not a tick box exercise. We've looked at that as well. Lots of work that we've done, and then our second year have been looking at this ITAP around modifying existing planning, as I said earlier on, and this notion that they quite often can design and follow a lesson plan. So we know our second year students can design and follow lesson plans because they've been doing it and doing it in placement, but we wanted them to modify what's there. We wanted to move off a little bit off our Brookes pro forma planning, using schools planning more effectively, just to make them more productive in that sense. But what we were finding was that they were becoming more sort of activity driven, as opposed to learning driven. So that's that idea of the pedagogy and the PCK, pedagogy content knowledge, and making sure that the learning is driving the lesson. And so making a scratch game instead of teaching sequence and debugging was my example there from computing. And we wanted to support their confidence, and we know that self-efficacy within our subject areas that are not core in primary. So the self-efficacy, for example, in computing at primary is very low, and I wanted to use AI to support some of that as well. Obviously, not being reliant on AI tools for subject knowledge, but using it to help scaffold their subject knowledge. I think that's important in that sense. And we wanted them to work co-create or co-plan with the technology, with their teacher mentors, in order to build confidence, but obviously then build that critique and refine planning, and not just reproducing it, as it kind of comes out of the output. So we wanted to make sure that they critique that and they refine it based on what they've learned from their first ITAP as well. So we weren't going in like cold, but we wanted to go in and now refine. It's about just sort of refining their practice in this sense. So looking at some work from CELIC 2023, we were thinking about looking at the TPAC model. We really like the TPAC model for integrating that technology and the PCK together. I think it's a really great model, and looking at ways that the TPAC has been extended to incorporate some of the AI elements of it. And this model here, the 5-part model here, looking at the second part in particular, which is this intelligent TPK. So thinking about how does the AI support the pedagogical knowledge and affordances of AI within there. So wanted them to really kind of start to think about that and using it to support that. So, and then obviously there's notion around the ethically centered elements of it, and the fairness, accountability, transparency. So the fat P's basically. That was also a number 5. So I think this model is really useful to help those trainees to understand how they can use AI tools and TPAC together. So thinking about that, thinking about this other model here as well, the more traditional TPAC model in this sense, with the integration between pedagogy and artificial intelligence, the link there between the two between the circles and the Venn diagram. So kind of this notion about integrating the GenAI tools into the TPAC, I think is really important. So I did a session on AI literacy, and that AI literacy gave them some background information about AI, and then obviously literacy skills around it, and then bringing them into this lesson design practice, so linking it now to lesson design, and scaffolding the lesson planning, and then using AI tools with the co-planning prompts, which I'll look at in a minute, plus their teacher mentors in school, because lots of their teacher mentors, so their teachers in school they're working with, are using AI tools to support their lesson design as well. So we wanted to use them as a resource as well for these students, and then working together to co-create or co-modify the lesson that they were teaching, not forgetting that human centeredness and thinking about the integrity and all those sorts of elements of it as well, and then obviously a prompt to help them to do this. So yeah, so it's using AI alongside what they already know has been really effective. And then so we were thinking about what does this kind of look like. So looking at the ITAP, what the trainees will learn during the ITAP, and we considered, the different learn that and learn how to's, and I've highlighted the AI ones here, and it was just really starting to think about how obviously AI is embedded in many of the tools that we already use, and then thinking about how GenAI can support teachers with their lesson design. So this is the learn that. And then obviously the alignment of professional responsibilities. So linking back to our professional responsibilities in terms of the ethics and the safeguarding and the bias and those sorts of things. And that there is a potential risk with putting data into these AI tools. So being aware of all of those things, thinking about those as the learn that. And then we were thinking about the learn how to. So we can see that on the right hand side, and I won't read them all out because there's quite a lot of text on the slide, but we can see how it kind of links to the ITAP, what they've previously learned on a previous ITAP, and we're now adding AI within that. So so this time it's about application of those AI tools, using it with professionalism, being discerning, considering their bias and all those sorts of things, and then prompting effectively, and then thinking about the lesson design as a whole, and applying your human intelligence to that. So those were our ITAP outcomes, and that's what we're working towards. And then we were thinking, okay, so how does it fit in with what our existing documentation or existing frameworks that support our students with this? So we've got our AI tools that we can use. So we've got ILA. So I asked Stuart from Oak National Academy to come and do a session around ILA, which we've got that in. And he was talking about how we can align what we do on what we do on our sort of co-planning and what we do in our lesson planning and all that sort of stuff, alongside working with the Oak National Academy ILA tool. And so obviously other large language models are available, so quite happy for them to use other ones, and we know schools are doing that anyway. But what we can see here is our co-planning prompt. So we've got a co-planning prompt sheet, and within the co-planning prompt sheet we talk about all sorts of elements of what have the children learn, what they're going to learn. It really supports the lesson planning. And then we've modified our co-planning prompts to include some AI elements. So we were thinking about, will the AI enhance or distract from my thinking in this lesson? So we wanted to actually think, well, is it worth having AI in this at all? What elements? So not planning whole lessons, but thinking about specific parts of the lessons that I could use AI to support me with. So explicit modeling could be a really good example. So can it help me to generate an explicit model that I can then use as part of the I part of the lesson, for example? Or, can it kind of be used for the assessment tool, and we can use ILA to generate assessments, those sort of like multi-choice quizzes, whatever we want there. So we can use that to do that. Or for scaffolding. So can it help support our children by adapting our teaching? And another element of this was thinking about, well, how does AI adapt or can be used for adapting our teaching so that we are meeting the needs of all of the children, that high quality teaching for all, which I think is really important. So we've put these prompts into this co-planning prompt sheet that goes to our trainees, and it goes to our teacher mentors. And then obviously, evaluating the output of that. And I think that's really important. And that links to the work of Georgia, thinking about those prompts and then the human centeredness and the output of those. I think that's where it links there. And then are you using it ethically and responsibly? We just wanted to prompt them on that. So our co-planning sheet was designed in a way that it's traditional lesson planning, but we're thinking of using it alongside the AI tool. So working with the AI tool and our teacher mentors in school. So humans alongside AI, I think is really important. And then in our lesson planning proforma, so we have a lesson plan proforma that we are using with our students. It's a scaffolded lesson plan proforma, and it talks about elements such as the I, we, you structure of the lesson. But at the very top, it talks about the big picture review. So we want our students to do a big picture review of like what where does this lesson fit into the sequence? What are you doing in this lesson, etc. And we added, as you can see in the screenshot here, we've added a box that says, I've considered how AI tools may support or hinder this plan. So that was something else we wanted them to think about was, actually, is it going to hinder what I'm doing, or is it going to support? So it could be that you've decided that you've tried to plan it with AI tools and your teacher mentor, and actually you've decided, no, it's not worth doing. So I'm just going to park that and go back to a more traditional method of teaching, of designing a lesson. So we wanted that side of it as well. And obviously then it's the co-planning question prompt sheet. So have you used the co-planning questions to support this as well? So we were very much kind of a case of, let's not offload our thinking to AI, but let's use it to augment what we currently do, and think about that. Don't forget that human-centeredness, not forgetting the model from Willingham, and the way people actually learn and stuff. So strengthening our human capacities, I think, is important. And that's from the UNESCO. You can see the couple of quotes there from the UNESCO document around that working with AI tools. So we've been developing, and this is very drafty, but we've been developing this sort of is there a structured framework? Is there a framework that we can use as a kind of cycle? I've done it as a sort of cycle here. I don't know if it's a cycle. It might be a different thing. I'm not sure. But for AI assisted lesson planning, so thinking about a process that we might go through, working with our AI tool in a way that can support our lesson planning and lesson design. So in this cycle, you can see that I've identified that it's a 5-step process, and I've made it cyclical because I think that's the review element of it. And the ultimate goal of it is to obviously apply these AI tools professionally to support our lesson design, resources, creation, adaptive teaching, whilst avoiding over-reliance. And then I'm thinking, well, okay, let's start with, we're going to identify the core learning, and then we're going to consider, prompting the AI. And then this is where the use of Georgia's fantastic teacher prompt comes in, because we're thinking, well, okay, let's prompt it, and let's now critique the output of this. How does it apply to our existing planning? So modifying existing planning, and then working with that teacher mentor and that co-planning element, working as almost as a 3-part planning team with your teacher mentor, the trainee, and an AI. Keep, tweak, and reject the outputs, and then maybe compare the suggestions from what we were thinking as humans, and then recording that in the lesson plan, and trying to codify as well. So there's this element about codifying components of the lesson and then using the AI to help codify that, if you see what I mean. But then not losing sight of that human-centeredness, which is why I put that as the context on the sort of dotted line around the outside, a bit like the TPAP model, thinking about that human-centeredness and not losing sight of that. Yeah, it's work in progress, but I just wanted to try and come up with some sort of model that we could hang off in terms of that. So yeah, it's interesting. And I'm not sure it's right, but I'm just putting it out there. So feel free to take and play and come up with your own ideas. And then obviously we've got the prompt engineering. So it was kind of built from Georgia's prompt engineering, or prompt, the teacher prompt, which I've introduced to our students, and they really like it. And we were comparing, and one of my students was comparing just asking ChatGPT for a lesson. Said, oh, can we have a lesson on year 4 on volcanoes? And then doing that same sort of thing by prompting it using Georgia's prompts. And yeah, better outputs were generated. I feel better outputs were generated whilst they were using this. So I'll give you an example. So our current 3rd years, they do a project at the moment called, it's about cultural placement. So the idea is that they go on a cultural placement visit, they then come back to university and they design cross-curricular lessons for planning. They sort of plan the trip, cultural venues trip, but they also design all the learning before, during, and after the trip, and they create lesson sequences and those sorts of things as part of their assignment. And I was really interested when I taught them a couple of weeks ago, about cross-curricular computing. How could they get cross-curricular computing alongside the cultural venue visits? And we were looking at, so they go on various visits across Oxford, and one of them is the Ashmolean Museum, and they go there and they say, oh, it's really great, Ashmolean Museum, which it is, we all know. And then I sort of say, well, how could you get computing? How could you create a cross-curricular computing lesson that involves the Ashmolean Museum? And they just look at me as though I've gone bananas, and a bit blankly. So I said, well, okay, let's think about working with an AI tool. Let's think about how we could do that. So thinking about Georgia's prompts here, design one cross-curricular computing lesson for year 4, inspired by the visit to the Ashmolean Museum. So starting to the task, lesson should help pupils use computing to reflect on, present, or deepen their understanding of what they've discovered at the museum, for example, by creating a digital artifact, animation, or interactive story. This is just, putting the task out there. Then I've given the expertise. Now, I know Georgia talked about the expertise was kind of implied, but I was more explicit with it and said, you're a year 4 class teacher, in England. This is the national curriculum with the computer science, information technology, digital literacy. We want to design a lesson that uses digital tools creatively, purposely, for example, Scratch, Creator, whatever. Okay, so I was more explicit around the expertise, and I could be, I could be more defined there. I could take out, actually, I want information technology as a particular focus in this sense. Then the audience, so I've said, mixed prior attainment class, year 4. They've been on a cultural visit. They've done this workshop, and I gave it the citation to the workshop. I said, this is the workshop they've been on. They've been learning about Rome and Britain. And then the conditions were from the national curriculum. So, national curriculum requires pupils to understand the Roman Empire, but from computing, it needs them to understand how to select and combine a variety of software. So I've just taken it from the national curriculum. And then I said to them, go prompt, go find out. And they did. And it was interesting then comparing that to just those cold kind of, give me a year 4 lesson about the Ashmolean Museum. This seemed to generate much better responses. And so that was good. And maybe what we need to now look at is, ILA as well. Yeah, more thoughts around this as well. But yeah, and then going back to Georgia's model again. So going away, prompting, and then that edit and refine process happening here as well. Excuse my rubbishy screenshot, but can you edit, can you refine, and keep doing that? And that human, I think that's the most important bit, is that human centeredness. So when I go back to my model back here, it's the outer circle, it's that dotted line that is super important at this point, isn't it? So yeah, it's that human centeredness through the prompt, and really kind of starting to connect the planning to the practice, I think is really important here. So we want our students to compare the AI suggestions with what they already know. So using what they already know, comparing that with the planning, the planning from the school, the planning from a scheme, because we know quite a lot of it is scheme based anyway, and then starting to analyze those problems. And then thinking about not whole lesson outputs, but maybe starting with just certain bits of the lesson. So, thinking about the vocabulary or the scaffolding or the modeling, those sort of elements of it. We get them to reflect. So at Oxford Brookes University, we get them to reflect in their trainee progress profiles. So we want them to think about the what, so what, now what. So we wanted to build elements of that in as well. So the idea is that we're now thinking, okay, so this is what I've been using AI tools for. So what, and kind of like, now what's the impact of that? So hopefully the impact, so the impact of that is better lesson planning, particularly around those foundation subjects or cross-curricular planning, that isn't just regurgitating the schemes, but starting to think a bit more deeply about things. Yeah, and this notion that AI is a mirror for thinking, not a shortcut, I think that's important too. So hopefully you can see where kind of heading with this. I mean, something that we do definitely recognize is that working with AI tools for our novice trainee, pre-service teachers, is is kind of scary for them, and they definitely lack confidence and self-efficacy. They lack self-efficacy, as I said, for our subject areas anyway of computing, and some of the foundation subjects. So I'm hoping that by doing this we can start to increase confidence and that metacognition within planning. And I'm just looking at some work here from I think it's the Netherlands, and they've got a framework around this adapting. So thinking about adaptive teaching now, this framework of adapting either for the step or for the task or for the entire curriculum. And they've been looking at how AI tools can be used by teacher educators to do this. So that kind of ties into what we've been looking at, very much ties into that. And then some other work, this is just directly lifted from the report. So they've written a magazine actually, and it's around, how have teachers kind of considered the tasks and using AI, and they've kind of gone down this sort of SAMR model, this sort of like, substitute, augment kind of model, where in this case they're talking about replace, complement, and augment, and using AI to do that. And I think that kind of fits into my model. But yeah, my model around co-planning with the AI tools. So is it replacing, is it replacing elements of the lesson, or is it complementing it? But I think mostly it's augmenting. It's around augmentation of lesson planning with AI tools, as opposed to replacement or complement. But yeah, again, I don't know. More research is needed, isn't it, in this sense? This was some AI lesson planning success criteria. So we're just thinking about, plan, critique, and adapt. So always keeping sight of learning first, making sure that we're moving away from this activity driven. We don't want to end up with Grecian pots. We don't paper mache stuff. We don't want to end up with that, but use of AI assisted lesson planning, having a framework for that. So that framework that I sort of created, using that framework, using the co-planning tools, using obviously Georgia's teacher prompt or something similar, thinking about the tools that we are going to be using to generate our lessons, and that critique's really important, and recording decisions. So yeah, really important stuff here. And just to finish off with, I was just thinking about how it links to the ITE ECF, and there's some references for those that are interested. But thank you for listening, and probably there's more questions than answers, but we're just very much experimenting with things at the moment. But thank you very much for that, everybody. Thanks. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Matthew. That was such a lot to unpack there. No pun intended.
I know. It's hard.
That's terrible, wasn't it? Sorry about that. Sorry.
No, there was a lot, and I just think there's a lot of questions, and I know I've answered any, but I've maybe created some more. I don't know.
Yes, we do have time, a couple of minutes. Pip is due to start at 22, so we've got time for a couple of minutes. If anybody wants to type anything in the Q&A, we did have a bit of chat going on there about ILA and what people think of ILA. Does any of our speakers or you, Matthew, want to have a chat or come in on that? Or otherwise, if somebody wants to put another question in. Yeah,
no, I think ILA's it's a long way to go yet, I think, in some ways, but in other ways it's quite nice what it's done with it. I was watching Stuart demonstrate it the other day to our trainees, and it is much better than the first version he showed us a year ago. It does come up with some pretty good stuff. It does, it uses what's in Oak National Academy's library of lessons. I mean, it does build from those, and it builds from the national curriculum. So I think it has the potential to be really powerful. I know they've now created it so that you can go into, when you choose a lesson through Oak's kind of store of lesson plans, you can then ask ILA to help you to create a summary of it or an assessment tool from that lesson, and so on. You can pick now, sort of pick from a drop-down list what you'd like it to create. So I think it's a watch this space. I think the issue they've got is that they need more development. It's a development team behind it, and maybe they need buy-in from a big AI company, maybe Open or Google or somebody, to help them to develop it further. I don't know. That's my take on it. I'm sure.
I think from speaking to them, the major selling point that they had was that you could be involved throughout the creation journey,
Yeah.
and the fact that they had the huge content store to draw from,
We
which is
definitely-
obviously something that the DFE has in development in the background, isn't it? The content store. That we need to learn more about that. Do you know any more about that, Miles or Matthew?
Well, there was like 4 million put aside for building this content store, which is really meta tagging existing open resources. The issue I have with this is that the stuff that secondary school teachers really want in the content store of exam papers and mark schemes and examiners' reports and GCSE and A-level specifications all belong to the exam boards, so cannot be sucked in to the content store. DFE really do need to strike a deal with these people. Exam fees come out of the public purse.
That's just a very relevant point. It seems to be a limitation for us at the moment as well. So, it's a clapping coming on in emojis. That's great. Has anybody got any other comments or questions they'd like answering? Oh, Miles, that's lovely. It's beautiful what you've put in there. Do you want to read that out to us?
No, because
A nice segue into Pip's speaking.
So Matt talks about we don't want Greek. What was it you said? We don't want Greek pots. We don't
Grecian
want
pots.
Grecian urn. It's Keats's ode to a Grecian urn is not entirely irrelevant about how inanimate objects can inspire us to, I want to say creativity, but there may be more to it than that. I am not a literary scholar by any means, but you may have struck on something there, Matt, intentionally or not. But well done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right, Matt.
Do you think we got away with it?
I'm not so sure.
Better keep an eye on this lot.